Hi, welcome to Horsepower TV. Drag racing is one of America's favorite motorsports, and through the years, Chevys have won more than their share of races. Now, what we got here is a 65 Malibu SS that runs in the Super Stock P class. The 220-horse 283 under the hood has made it to a Muncie 4-speed, and when this thing launches, get this, it's revving at over 10,000 RPM.
Oh, man. Now, that's a violent launch, one that I'm sure is hard on parts, but you got to admit, it's a whole lot of fun watching this thing carry the front wheels for about the first 100 feet. Now, we're taking a little bit different approach with our 66 Bel Air. Now, we're using a whole lot more cubic inches, a lot less RPM, and an automatic transmission to turn it into a consistent bracket racer. We started with a GM Performance Parts 502 short block, then added a Comp Cam's full roller setup, Edelbrock Performer heads, their RPM air gap intake, and 800 CFM carb. The transmission is a 4L80E from Jet Performance. Then we finished up the drivetrain with a Curry 9-inch rear end.
That thing's going to see a lot of street duty too, so we need a good high-flowing exhaust to work with the hooker headers we've already hung on the engine. This American Thunder system is from Flowmaster, and well, since they don't make one for a Bel Air, we ordered this one for a Chevy with a similar frame setup. We'll do some modifications on it later. Now, the pipes are 2.5-inch mandrel bent, and for mufflers, we're using their 70 series for big blocks.
Before we attack that exhaust, though, let's go ahead and install the drive shaft. You may remember a couple of weeks ago we showed you how to measure for one, and then we called those numbers in to our friends at the Driveline shop. Now, what we got back was this massive 4-inch diameter drive shaft that's made from lightweight aluminum to reduce rotating mass and help us get off the line just a little bit quicker. Now, let's see if it's going to fit. Let's see what happens here. Ah, that's a good sign. The front went right in. Wow, and the back end lined right up. This thing fits perfectly. I guess I must have read the tape right the first time. Now, anytime that you're ordering a drive shaft for a high horsepower car, make sure that you specify the non-greasable heavy-duty U-joints. Now, they're not drilled for the grease passages, which means they're solid steel and have some extra strength.
Yeah, well, why don't you share your strength with me and help me hang this exhaust. We'll start with the mufflers.
All right, let's get it up into place.
Then with our mufflers supported on stands, we connect the head pipes with the headers. Well, next we can test fit this tailpipe, and uh-oh, looks like we got a big problem here. This pannard rod is right in the way, so rather than run the pipe over the axle like we planned, we're going to fab one up to run under it and extend it on out. Well, here's what we came up with. It's a 2.5-inch S-pipe with a 4-inch drop. Now, once we get everything into position like we want it, we can start welding the system into place.
With a converter that stalls higher than stock, plus all those burnouts we'll be doing at the track, hey, we're really going to need this trans-cooler that we got from B&M that's specially designed for race cars. Now, to do its job properly, we need to mount it in front of the radiator. But first, I've been up some lines that run from the cooler to the transmission. I'm going to install them while the car is in the air.
We're getting mighty close to putting some fire in the hole of this Bel Air bracket racer, but before we do, we got to finish the wiring. Oh, and wait till you see the cool set of gauges we got for this thing.
And you will, right after the break, so stay with us.
Hi, welcome back to the Horsepower Shop. Well, we're getting awful close to firing up this 502 in Chuck's Bel Air bracket racer, but before we can, we got to take care of some electrical work for the fuel pump, ignition, and right now, the transmission.
That's right. We're using a 4L80E, which is an electronic transmission. Now, a couple of weeks ago, we mounted the computer under the seat, and to finish the job, we need to make our power connections and install his throttle position sensor. The first step, though, is to tap into the distributor so we can give the computer an engine speed signal. The hookups vary according to the type of ignition that you've got, so make sure that you read your instructions carefully. Now, we're using an MSD ignition, so we can tap right into these green and purple wires. Of course, to make the job a little bit easier, we're going to use these quick connectors that come in the kit. Just position them on the wire and squeeze them to lock them into place. Then plug in the engine speed leads from the main harness.
Well, now we can power up the computer using a 12-volt source that's hot only when the key is on. Now, to do that, we'll use another one of these little connectors, and we'll just tap right in here to this wire that's used to activate our MSD ignition. Now, it passes through the firewall, as you see here, and we'll connect it to the fuse box once we find a lead that's hot with the switch on. To locate that lead, we'll use our continuity tester. Now, with the switch on, we'll find a connection that lights up the tester. Okay. Then, when we turn the switch off and probe the same connection, if it doesn't light up the tester, well, we found a good lead.
Of course, we also need to hook the computer to a constant 12-volt source so it'll hold its memory. To do that, just use the same procedure as before. Probe the fuse box until you find a lead that's hot all the time.
Our throttle position sensor is next. It controls shift points and line pressure, which affects the firmness of those shifts. Now, this TPS comes with lots of cables, so finding a place to mount it is no problem. In fact, I think we'll mount it right here on this fender well once we fab up a couple of L brackets. Once the TPS is in place, you can mount the cable bracket to a carb stud, then snap the cable into the bracket, connect the cable into the carb linkage, and you're ready to adjust cable preload. And you do that by removing all the slack out of the cable. You want about a 1/16 to an 1/8 inch tension at idle. Then at full throttle, make sure you have 1 1/4 to 1 3/8 movement with no binding or interference. That will get your throttle position sensor adjusted close enough to run and drive, but first chance you get, you need to take this thing by a professional shop. They've got an electronic scan tool there that will give you an accurate reading to verify wide open throttle. If the TPS needs adjustment, well, you just press down on this lock tab, move the cable back and forth in the bracket until you get the right readings. All right, well, that's going to take care of our wiring for the transmission and the MSD.
Yeah, but it doesn't take care of all of our electrical work. We still need to get power to our fuel pump. Really, it's a pretty simple operation, though. It's a 2-wire deal, and I've already connected one of them to the ground back on the fuel pump. Now, this red wire will run inside, and I'm going to hook it to this toggle switch, and from there, we're going to go find another switch 12-volt source at the fuse box. Well, that takes care of all of our electrical work. Now, you'll notice that I mounted the switch right here where it's convenient in case I need to cut the fuel off quickly later on. So I guess all that's left now is to top the engine and trans off with fluids. And hey, wait a minute, that reminds me, those valve covers don't have any breathers or a way to add oil, so I guess I better get on that. Once we determine a suitable location, we use an 1 1/4 hole saw to make our holes. Then snap in the grommets and the breather.
For trans fluid, we're using this royal purple synthetic ATF in the Bel Air. Jet recommends a Dextron 2 or 3 in their system, and this fluid meets those specs while giving us improved lubrication and resistance to heat breakdown.
Of course, we're going to be using their synthetic engine oil later on, but right now, once I get these valve covers on, we'll top the engine off with a petroleum-based oil so the rings will seat properly.
All right, sounds pretty good, and it's great to hear old White Lightning here finally make some thunder.
It sure is. Of course, once we get it broken in, we're going to take it to the track and dial it in, see what kind of numbers it'll put up.
Yeah, well, you're going to have to put up with us a little more today. There's more horsepower TV ahead, so stay tuned. It's the Bowtie Festival of the Year in West Palm Beach. We'll take you there next on the show.
We're the big boys. We're the bow ties.
Go Chevy!
Well, where's the Fords?
Well, nowhere around here, that's for sure. In fact, this is the all-Chevy show at Moroso, and if it doesn't have a bow tie on the body, it better have one under the hood.
I think the Chevy fan is a diehard fan, just like the Dale Earnhardt fan. They love Dale, they love Chevrolet. It's a passion with them that they're always going to have as part of their daily life.
What do you drive?
I have a Camaro.
This year's all-Chevy show was a record breaker with quarter-mile streetcar drag racing in several classes. And we do mean street. Mike DeCio drives his 34 Roadster to the track where he competes in the combo class.
Car runs like high 9, about 130 mile an hour. I could take it out and drive it on the track and then drive it home and hit the street.
So, how do you keep your street Chevy's parts tough enough for this kind of abuse? Well, just ask Chevelle owner Don Olmsted, who's been racing here for 30 years.
The pistons and rods have been in 4 blocks, and they're still like new.
Wow.
And it's all in just how you fit them. You got to hand fit them, massage them. They're like a good woman. You got to take care of them.
William Pomales also competes in the combo class in his 68 Yanko Camaro. Come on now.
It's a Yanko lookalike, but I put like 7 years of hard labor into the car, and I got it more or less where I'm running at right now. It's running 970s at 140.50 mile an hour, and hopefully she'll do pretty good today.
Okay, hold everything. I know a Mustang when I see one. What in the heck are you doing here?
Well, it is a Mustang with 86 Saleen, but it is powered by a small block Chevrolet engine with a turbo 400 transmission and aluminum bow tie heads and a little power adder on top just to help it out.
Mike Rose races another half-breed. It's a consistently quick Trans Am he's been racing for the past year.
It's a 511 cubic inch big block Chevrolet, and it's probably somewhere in the vicinity of 750 to 800 horsepower. And depending on the weather, it runs EPs of anywhere from 870s to 890s.
The Bowtie show cars were an eyeful with everything from numbers-matching fabulous 57s to supercharged Vegas and all kinds of cool Camaros. I tell you, the bow ties that drive me wild are the early model Stingrays. Well, check this one out. It's a 67 with a completely restored, beautiful red interior. Got 4 on the floor and just as gorgeous outside. Plus, the original 427 big block. I always wanted this car. Meanwhile, back in the pits, here's the big winner of last year's heads-up DOT class competition. Bill Tukey Swales with his 70 Nova powered by a 600 cube big block.
The motor itself makes almost 1,080 horsepower. I get a 2-stage nitrous oxide system on it, in which, the car weighs 3,300 pounds. It's gone as fast as 820 at 164 on street tires.
Well, this year his ET was higher, 883, but enough to win a second consecutive championship here at this annual Bowtie Bash, where if you bring a Mopar or a Ford, you're a fool. Because here, once a year,
Chevy rules! Yeah!
Horsepower TV's Quick Tech is brought to you by Wyotech.
Hey, let's face it, a lot of times factory gauges just don't tell you all that you want to know about what's going on under the hood. And even if they did, well, is that information accurate and reliable? Well, chances are it's not. And that's why a lot of gearheads like us choose to install aftermarket instruments like these from Autometer. Now, the first step is to decide which gauges you really need. While some measure everything from fuel pressure to boost pressure, you can usually get by with 4 basic instruments: the tachometer, water temperature, oil pressure, and something to keep tabs of the electrical system. Now, personally, I like to measure volts. Next, you need to choose what type of gauges you want to install, electrical or mechanical. Now, mechanical are reliable and they don't need an electrical source to operate. Plus, they also give you a wider sweep for an easier read. But the downside is they're harder to install since you have to bore sizable holes in your firewall for things like this capillary tube to pass through. On the other hand, electrical gauges use small gauge wires for all their connections, and you can usually pass them through an existing grommet or boot on the firewall. However, they don't give you the same sweep as the mechanical gauges, and well, 90 degrees is about their limit. When it comes to tachs, the old mechanical cable drive units are pretty much history. The new electronic tachs, however, can be either pretty basic, like one that measures only RPM, or more sophisticated like this one that has a peak RPM memory and a bright shift light that allows you to keep your eyes on the track instead of the tach. Regardless of whether you choose electrical or mechanical gauges, you're still going to have to install a sending unit or two on the engine. Now, to prevent leaks when you do, you can either wrap the sending units with Teflon tape like this or apply some thread sealer. Now, another consideration is when you pass any wires or tubes through the firewall, make sure they're protected with a grommet to prevent cutting or chafing. The final determination is where best to mount your gauges. Most people like to mount them on the dash like that, but if you do, make sure they clear all moving objects like this shifter here. And for the tach, most racers prefer to mount it on the dash so they can keep an eye on it and the track at the same time. Personally, I prefer the steering column where it's out of the way, yet still plenty visible without blocking your view of the road.
You know, that could come in handy in heavy traffic, especially with somebody like you behind the wheel.
Man, well, at least I'm not a loose nut behind the wheel.
If you want some extra power in your race car, but nothing seems to pan out, well, maybe you should check out this affordable steel wet sump pan from B&B. Now, it fits most stock chassis cars and comes with this built-in scraper and unidirectional screen to reduce windage and oil wrap up on your crank. Now, it also comes with a specially designed pickup and magnetic drain plug. Now, if you want one for your small block Chevy, better plan on draining about $200 from your budget, a little more for your big block.
Well, how about a little more air for your engine regardless of its size? These new Rush Performance filters use a pleated aluminum mesh that sandwiches a special cotton gauze for maximum airflow. Now, they also use a biodegradable oil to make them washable for repeated use. Of course, they come in just about every shape and size to fit most popular applications, and hey, they'll fit your budget pretty easily too. Prices start at about $30.
Well, here's something to fit the needs of most of you racers out there. CSI makes these trick billet feeler gauge holders with knurled handles for a solid grip. They're also color-coded and marked for intake and exhaust, and they make this single one for you guys who set both valves at the same dimension. Now, they come with an assortment of feeler gauges that fit right into the holders.
Well, hey, I tell you what, I'd rather have a valve lashing than a tongue lashing any day. How much are those things?
Well, $40 for the pair, $20 for the single, and that's hard to beat.